I'm very indecisive. In fact, I'm so indecisive that I can't even decide where to record this intro. Man, that was a cold pull. So usually what I do whenever I have to make a decision is I put all my options into a random name picker online and just spin a wheel to pick one. But instead of having to do that online now, why don't I have an actual physical wheel? Now you might be asking yourself, why don't you just buy one online? Well, one, I want one that actually stands up relatively tall, and all the ones I see online are pretty small. Two, all the ones that are a good height are like over $50, and I'm not trying to spend a lot of money on this. And three, I'm an engineering student, so I want to build it myself, save money, and I want it to look janky as hell. I also want to build mine in such a way that I can have interchangeable preset wheel options, so that way whenever I have a decision that I have to make repeatedly, I can just change out a wheel for something that I already have all of my decisions on and just spin it again. You'll see what I'm talking about later. So here's the basic idea. Eventually, we'll have it sitting to a stand, maybe like a tripod or something, which is connected to a telescoping rod, so I can adjust the height for my really short friends and for easy storage. I also want to have interchangeable preset wheels for times I need to remake a decision or other times where I need more selections. For example, like trying to figure out what color filament to use when 3D printing, which is actually the inspiration for this video. So I was reaching at the store and I found these PVC pipes that fit inside of each other pretty nice. So I figured these could be our telescoping rods, and in order to make them lock into place, we can drill a hole right through it and just take a pin into it. And that's why we put down safety boards, so you don't drill into your desk. So now that we have the rods all connected, it's time to 3D print our connector. So here's what I'm thinking for the connector design. Essentially, the connector is going to be a T-shape where we'll have pipes on both ends and the ball bearing right in the middle. The ball bearing hole will go all the way through the connector, and we can design our own screwdriver or ratchet of some sort, so that way we can tighten it from the other side, whenever we're switching out the wheels to secure them in place. So while I'm modeling out the connector and waiting for it to print, I realized that a lot of you guys watching right now aren't subscribed. So make sure you subscribe, it's free, and it really makes me feel special. Aw, man. Well, cracked it right down the seam. So I might have to reprint it now. So because of this unfortunate break, I can have a chance to explain to you about the part of engineering that almost nobody likes, tolerancing. See, tolerances are the margin of variability that you can have on your dimensions whenever you're making a part. So that way nothing has to be exactly perfect, which is going to be very, very expensive. And as engineers, we're trying to save money. There are a few types of tolerances. For example, there's a sliding fit or a running fit. This is an example of when your hole size is always going to be bigger than something you're trying to slide in. For example, the PVC pipe part. Whenever you try to connect the PVC pipe onto the connector, you always want to be able to remove it and put it back in. So that's called a sliding or running fit. For the ball bearing, however, I use something called an interference fit, meaning that the size of the ball bearing is always going to be bigger than the size of the hole. So that way whenever I had to press it in with a hydraulic press, it made sure that the ball bearing would never come out of its hole. And since the ball bearing was bigger than the size of the hole, typically what would happen is the plastic would just deform. But unfortunately, my tolerances were too tight, which would cause the plastic to break. So there's a few things that I can do in this situation to fix this problem. One is heat up the PLA. PLA is notorious for having a very low heat tolerance, meaning if I can just hit it with a hairdryer, it starts bending and stretching. Another thing I could have done is fix the tolerances themselves, which is making the hole a little bit bigger, so that way the ball bearing can still fit into it. If I made the ball bearing and the hole the exact same size, I could just use glue to fit it in, but I was just trying to avoid that method. Another thing about tolerances with 3D printing specifically is you always have to keep in mind the thickness of the walls. 3D printing typically has a 0.2 millimeter layer height, which means each layer that goes down is 0.2 millimeters. So you have to compensate for that in your design by either adding or subtracting 0.2 millimeters for each side. For example, for the PVC pipe that might be a ½ inch in diameter, I would need to do a ½ inch plus 0.4 millimeters in order for it to compensate for the wall thickness and have a good sliding fit so I can easily take it apart and put it back together. So because of all this, it's back to the computer so I can redesign it because I also want to change out the ball bearing I was using. And just like magic and a little bit of heat, we now have a ball bearing inside of our pipe connector. Now all I have to do is cut off the excess pipe and then begin assembling the top. Finally, here's how we're going to do the knocker up at the top. Basically, we're going to have a funnel connection on the top PVC pipe so that way we can insert the knocker itself. We're going to 3D print the knocker out of TPU plastic, which is a flexible plastic, so hopefully it'll be able to bend out of the way yet still maintain its rigidity to be able to stop the board. You know the drill by now. We hopped back on the computer and began modeling it out so we can get it 3D printed. Alrighty, so now that we have both parts printed out and we have this attached, I noticed that it might be a little bit long. So instead of putting dowel rods all the way out here, which would make it look even weirder, I decided I'm just going to take out this PVC and make these two parts one part. Because as you notice, this part right here failed. So I'm just going to make this all one part, reprint it so it looks nice, and then also it'll shorten up the length right here so we don't have to have as big sticks. So it's about 2:45 p.m. I just woke up, and I don't know what's with me and failed prints, but almost like every print has failed. Like, just cut right in half. Which is weird, because I found it like this, so I don't even know how it finished, but... So I guess it's another 8 hours I have to reprint this. But in the meantime, while that's printing, I began working on the ratchet system, so that way we can get that out and going. And after a bit of frustration, the ratchet is finally done. We can go ahead and tighten this down. And tighten it down I did. Finally, after 8 hours, it finally had a successful print. It is currently 2:45 a.m. and we now have this actual successful print to put on our part and finish this up. So to actually make the main part of this for the wheel, I bought these circular dry erase pads that would stick onto it, but now I just needed some sort of solid base to actually give this thing some weight. And so I grabbed the same plywood sheet that I used in my last video, by the way you should go check it out. Since there's a bunch of extra room on the bottom, I decided to use that. So I laser etched a circle into it so I can have an outline and began using a saw to cut around it. And it might be hard to tell from this time lapse right here, but this actually took a really long time. It was really hard to get all the curves with the saw, and by the end I was absolutely dripping in sweat. But I am here to prove to all these kids that you don't need those special tools just to do something stupid. I mean, just look at those socks and flip-flops. You think I'm a bright kid with the know-how and the tools? Absolutely not. I'm just a dumb teenager sitting in my basement while it's summer vacation. I have nothing better to do. Anyway, I found the center point of the board and I just drilled a hole into it. Alrighty, so welcome to the first test of putting the actual wood on here. I just took off the cardboard and now you can watch my tears when it ultimately fails. Alrighty, and now for the first spin. Alrighty, and now for the first spin. It spins. It spins really well, actually. Still spinning. I was expecting this to not spin as much. Looks like it's slowing down. Alright, so I guess it looks a little weighted to this side. So we can either hope that this is going to support it, or we can even just shave a little off at the bottom. But yeah, that spins really well. Wow. Cool. So it is currently 4:26 a.m. I know it's mirrored. I'm using the front camera. But it's currently 4:26 a.m. I've been working on this, and here's what I got so far. So here's what we have so far. It's not on the base, because what I'm using for the base is actually the tripod what's holding up my phone right now. So we're just kind of disconnected whenever I want to use this. But basically, I have all the colors up there. This is all the colors that I have for 3D printing, which is the original inspiration for this video that I was talking about before. And then one problem I did have is this didn't reach all the way down here, but this actually just kind of stops on its own. So I figured it's just going to point, so it's not really going to actually click, it's just going to stop and point. So it'll be alright. But basically, I got our sticky whiteboard pads. My microphone fell off. Basically, we got our sticky whiteboard pads on here. And then I also took a piece of dowel rod and cut it up and stuck it on the top, just so you have something to grab onto, and also to have the dividers. So now whenever you spin it, it stops automatically. And I got blue. So yeah, basically it. This is what I spent months of my time working on. I mean, really the longest part was getting all the 3D prints done, because that's very, very long. And finally now, to demonstrate the swapping out process for how the interchangeable wheels is, I'm now going to disconnect this wheel so effortlessly. Alright, so now I can take our old wheel and simply just switch it to our new wheel. I don't have enough time to make a second wheel, so I just put it on the back of this one. And we're going to very simply just connect it into here. Where do I put the other nut? And just like that, we have our new wheel on here. So we're just going to go ahead and spin it. And oh my gosh, wouldn't you know it? I guess you guys have to hit that subscribe button. So, I mean, if it's just luck of the spin of the wheel, then I guess you guys have to do it. I mean, it's really out of my power. So, oops. So I guess enough of me talking. Let me show you the real potential of this before I end the video. Fireworks! Wow! And well, just like that, my indecisive is now completely solved, thanks to the good old decision picker. I guess now I can use this to decide where to record my intro now so I can refilm it. So now, if you'll excuse me, it is currently 5:14 a.m. and I am going to bed. Good night.